Hello and welcome to WCTV. My name is Ted Severance, and this is a series we're going to call Tell Ted, where I hope to find interesting people and businesses and things that happened around the Wadsworth area, certainly in my past. We're going to start today with a company that was started here in Wadsworth by two Wadsworth High School graduates. Both graduated 1966. A company that grew to the point where they shipped millions of dollars of their product around the world. The name of the company was CNC Fur. CNC was Chuck Severance and Larry Casenhiser, affectionately known back in the day and maybe still today as Casey. So you had Chuck and Casey running CNC Fur. But it didn't start as CNC Fur. It started way before that. And we're going to get into that today with my guest, Larry Casenhiser, and the poor woman that had the job of being the office manager for CNC Fur. Talk about trying to herd cats. With you guys' permission, I'm going to start with a little bit about Chuck. Chuck Severance was my brother. He can't be here. We sadly lost Chuck in 2011. Chuck had a little, some people remember him as Chuck Vorse. Some people will remember him as Chuck Severance. His parents were divorced. My parents were divorced. My dad married his mom, and down the road then adopted the three Vorse children, Cheryl, the oldest, and Chuck and Char, who were twins. Interesting side note, Cheryl, the year that my dad had adopted her, she had already graduated. She went from Vorse to Severance, and she got married at the end of that same year and became a Powers. So she had three last names in 1 year. Interesting. Charlene, some of you might remember, was the sesquicentennial queen, and Caesar Carino, as a matter of fact, who does many of these shows, had the job of ushering Charlene around to all of her functions that she had to go to as the Wadsworth Sesqui Queen. Claims he enjoyed it and remembers it well. CNC Fur was Chuck and Casey. You know a little bit about Chuck. Chuck eventually got a job at Joe Smith's farm out on Leatherman Road. Larry, do you remember when Chuck got that? I think he was in junior high.
I believe he was, actually. Ninth grade, maybe. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah. We lived on Simcox Extension off of West Street, and Chuck would walk to work. It wasn't the walk you might think. He could cut through the fields. Hicklings had a farm that was at the dead end. Stratford used to dead end into Hicklings farm, and Chuck could cut through the woods, down his fields, through the woods, up the hill, or go through the tunnel, which eventually came with Interstate 76, and be right there at Joe Smith's farm. Along the way, he started trapping. There's a creek that runs down through there. I believe it's part of the Holmesbrook Creek. Runs clear down to Holmesbrook Park now. And he would walk to work twice a day. It was a dairy farm, and at some point started trapping. Where did you grow up, Larry?
I grew up on Lyman Street, actually.
Okay.
Went from there to my grandmother's over, I forget the name of the street, but then moved out to Eastern Road.
And how old were you when you were on Eastern Road, roughly?
I went to freshman in high school.
Okay. Had you been trapping prior to that, or is that pretty much when you started?
That's when I started.
When you lived out on Eastern? Mm-hmm. Were you trapping on your own property, or did you have permission from the farmers around?
I was working for the farmer that I was trapping the creek that went through his property.
And now, in full disclosure to the audience, I've known Larry since I was 12 years old. And so I'm fairly close and remember a lot of this myself, not as well as he does. You worked for Dave Bittaker, and when I remember it, Dave Bittaker had a farm up on top of Acme Hill. But you met him and worked for him prior to that?
Yes. Where
did he live?
He lived on, it used to be 94.
Okay.
It runs south of Wadsworth.
Still State Route 94, I believe. out that
I'm not
way.
sure. They changed it around a couple times.
Yeah. So you're trapping out there. You don't. Do you even know Chuck at this point? Were you bussed into school then from Eastern Road?
I knew Chuck, but we weren't friends or anything at that time.
Okay. You were bussed in,
Yes.
obviously, from Eastern Road. Most of the kids when I was growing up if you were on a bus from the country, you went to Isham. Is that where you went?
No, actually, when I was in school, I was at Lincoln.
Okay.
And after it was Lincoln, then I went downtown.
Right to the what we called the junior high
Right.
back then.
And then from there, we moved out on the Eastern Road, and I was bussed into town then.
Okay. So your elementary school years and Chuck's, you guys weren't hanging together, you guys weren't palling around
No.
together, you just knew who each other were. Mm-hmm. So then we move into ninth grade, you're all thrown in at the junior high, which is what happened to all of us. Mm-hmm. You're trapping, I know Chuck's trapping by then.
Yes.
But you guys still aren't
No.
sharing your ideas, you don't know he's trapping, he doesn't know you're trapping.
I might have. I can't say for sure.
Okay. When did you find out that?
By ninth grade.
Okay. And then when did you guys say, why don't we put our stuff together and see if we can get more?
Junior in high school.
So we're talking 65.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move into high school then, because, well, let's go back. I'm getting ahead of myself. Who was your mom and dad?
Bob and Jean Casenhiser.
And was Jean from Wadsworth?
Yes.
And what was her maiden name?
Mosier.
She was a Mosier. Okay. I know your dad had a full-time
That's
job.
wrong. I'm
but
sorry.
I know your dad had a full-time job, but I also know he raised chinchillas. Mm-hmm. High-quality fur. Did he raise those? Was he raising those? I knew that when you guys were out on 94. Did he have those prior to that house?
Yeah, he bought them actually when he was on Lyman Street.
Really? So he'd been raising the chinchillas a good while.
Yes.
By the time you got into anything about the fur business. Do you know why he picked chinchillas? I know it's an expensive fur. I know it's one of the finest furs that's actually
Probably
still in demand today.
Because you could raise it in your house, in your basement.
Okay. Was it ever in the wild?
They are in wild. I forget exactly where it was from. That's where they originated, from the mountains, actually.
I guess there's no such thing as a farm-raised animal. They had to come from the wild at some point, if I thought.
No,
think
I
about
wouldn't
it.
think so.
Right. Did your dad raising chinchillas or having them, and I presume you saw that he sold them from time to time. Mm-hmm. Did that have anything to do with your interest in trapping when you were young, do you
Not
think?
really. When I lived out in the country, moved out to Eastern Road, the guy I worked for used to trap, and that's probably where I got my interest from trapping.
Dave Bittaker?
Yeah.
Okay, I never knew he trapped.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Did your mom have siblings?
Yes.
Did they stay in Wadsworth, and who were they?
Robert, Leonard, and
It'll come to you.
yeah,
Is Robert Mosier the one that had had the store? Was that her brother, Bob Mosier?
no.
Okay.
They were some relation, but I can't tell you what.
Gotcha. And what about your dad? Did he have siblings?
Yes.
And who were they? And are they still around?
No, both of them are gone.
Okay.
Jack and
Did you have an Al? Was it Al?
yes.
I thought I remembered meeting him one or two times. And did they both lived in Wadsworth also?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
Actually, Jack moved to California and moved back to Wadsworth.
boy, back in the day, not too many people did that. If you got to California, you stayed out there. The one thing I remember was that your dad wrestled and you wrestled. I think one of the first wrestling, by far the first high school wrestling match I ever went to was when you and Chuck wrestled. Remember what weight class you wrestled?
145. Well, actually, I started at 127 when I was a freshman.
And then ended up.
Southmore, excuse me, Southmore.
So from sophomore to senior, you went from 127 to 145?
Yes.
Wow. And what did Chuck wrestle? Do you remember? What
He
weight?
wrestled 145. Or 138.
I was going to say, I thought he was a little bit before you. And you ended up going to state. And your dad also went to state wrestling from Wadsworth, correct?
Yes.
And how'd you do?
I won my first match.
Okay. Did you only go your senior year?
Yeah. Well, I went to state my senior year only, yes.
Okay. And your dad was a senior at Wadsworth when
Yes.
he went to state? Do you remember what year that would have been?
38, I think. or
Okay.
30, somewhere's right in that area. They won the state championship that year, I know that.
Okay. Who was your coach? Do you remember?
Roger Cecil.
That's who I was thinking it was, but I wasn't sure. Now, the other thing I remember about going to your wrestling matches was there was a guy there always, and I think that was your dad.
Probably.
Your dad, when I started thinking about who your coach might have been, I'm thinking probably one of the best coaches Larry could have had would have been his dad. And he was vocal. He was not.
Oh, yes.
He didn't hold back when you were on the mat. Now, by this time, say that's junior and senior year. You and Chuck now know each other. You've been trapping together for a little while. What did you do with the fur? You just got your driver's license. Well, you guys had to sell fur before you got your driver's license, didn't you?
Well, we both had our driver's license as sophomores.
Okay. So you're trapping?
Freshman, excuse me.
All right. So you're trapping. You've both got a car. Where are you selling your fur?
Locally, Joe Smith or Dick Thomas.
The only two other fur dealers I ever knew from Wadsworth, correct? Did you
Right.
ever know of any others?
I didn't know any others. At one time there was others, but I can't even tell you who they were.
Yeah, that would probably go back further.
Yes.
They were out of the business. So you gather up your furs, you're selling them local, but that changed. How did it change? Why did it change? What was the thinking that we're going to sell to somebody else, and how far away were they?
That was actually after we graduated from high school.
Okay.
And
Now wait, let's stop there. You graduated from high school, so at the whole time you're in high school, you're selling to either Dick or Joe,
yes,
Dick Thomas or Joe Smith. After high school, you both went in the service.
yes,
Both Army.
yes,
You became an MP,
yes.
and Chuck, mortar platoon sergeant, if I recall,
He was mortar, yes,
also 101st Airborne,
yes.
second generation, because my dad was 101st Airborne as well. So you get out of the service, and you go back to trapping together?
At that time, not together, no. Yes, we did actually. I come to think, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Yes, we did.
But you also both had full-time jobs,
Yes.
right? As I recall, Chuck was at the hardening room over at Ryder and Harder Dairy,
Yes.
working in the coldest spot in the plant, dealing with the ice cream and whatnot. Where did you go?
I went to the Barefoot Soul.
Okay, so you're working, Chuck's working, you're still trapping nights, weekends, mornings, whatever?
Nights, pretty
Nights.
much.
Okay. Where were you living? You and you married Jackie Connell.
Yes.
Where did you guys live?
Well, we started off on Broad Street and eventually ended up out on 9-Line Road.
Okay, and that's where I remember. I don't remember you guys being on Broad Street, but Medina Line. Chuck married Carol Crawford from Erie, Pennsylvania, and they rented an apartment over in Fairlawn to begin with. And then they bought a house, I think, out on Valley Side, it was
Yes.
called, and then ultimately ended up on North Kane. So you're back from the service, you're working, you're trapping, you're married. And you stopped selling at some point to Joe and Dick Thomas. Where did you go, and why did you go, and how far away were they?
We went to start with other somewhat local dealers, or hired dealers, and they were paying more money.
Okay, and it was worth the drive
Yeah,
to get the extra dough. Then at some point, and I find this fascinating because I just learned it not long ago, you ended up selling your furs in Montreal, Canada. Is that accurate?
Yes.
You're living on Medina Line Road. You're doing your scraping. You're getting all your prep work done out there, correct?
Yes.
Then how did you get fur in any quantity from Medina Line Road to Montreal?
In a van. Drove it from, we left Friday night and we'd be back Sunday.
You left Friday night, so you leave after you've already worked, you've checked your traps or whatever. You're still trapping at this point,
No,
right?
at that time we were not trapping. We were strictly buying fur.
Okay, so you kind of went into competition with Dick Thomas and Joe Smith, and now
Yes.
they're the third dealer in town. But you're not CNC Fur yet, correct?
Not officially.
Okay, right, not officially. I mean, you and Chuck were pretty fast friends. You guys hung around together from whatever period in high school for the rest of your lives. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised. I mean, you guys probably thought of yourself as CNC Fur, but it wasn't official yet. So you get in the car on Friday night after work. How did you bail? You weren't bailing the fur
No,
yet, were you?
that was just putting in the sack, burlap bags.
Burlap bags. And how many of them could you get in the van for a weekend trip to Montreal?
Oh, geez, I don't remember 10, but quite a few.
How many in a bag?
You could get
You're doing muskrat and raccoon mostly?
basically, yes. We could get roughly 200 muskrats in a bag and roughly, depending on size, 50, 60 to 100 coon, something like that.
So you're taking quite a lot, and that was all gathered during that week.
Yes.
Were you financing this at that time out of yours and Chuck's paychecks? I mean, you guys are having to pay the trappers coming into your garage
Right.
on Medina County Line Road. So you guys are financing it by yourselves at this point.
No, we actually had a loan from Bill Reimer. We went to the bank and got a loan.
Bill Reimer was the First National Bank back then.
Yes.
And Debbie, you ended up dealing with Bill Reimer a fair amount, I'd say.
Yes.
A loan. So you're making enough money now on these trips to Montreal. Your gas, I presume you got a room somewhere.
No.
You didn't get a room in a hotel?
No.
All right, let's go into how did that trip happen then? So you leave here on Friday night. Where'd you go?
Went to Montreal. We sold our first Saturday. We usually get there Saturday morning early.
How long a drive is it from Wadsworth to Montreal?
600 miles. Geez,
It's got to
Ted,
be
I
a
don't
12. It's got
remember
to be
how
a
long it
1,200 mile
was.
trip.
Huh?
That's got to be 1,200 miles. If it took you 6 hours, roughly.
Round trip, yes.
Wow. Okay. So you get up there, you sell your fur on Saturday. Is this at an auction or was there a
No,
dealer?
it was at a dealer's.
An individual.
Yes.
Do you remember his name?
Geez,
Was that Henry? Henry Stein?
Kaufman.
Kaufman. Okay. So you're selling your fur to them. You're getting a check, or you guys getting cash at the?
Check.
Okay. And you owe money to Bill Reimer to cover that buying process
Yes.
that you just went through. So you get home Sunday,
Yes.
go down to the bank Monday, pay
No.
off the loan? No. How did that work?
Well, we had our loan ran till in the spring, February or March, I believe, if I remember right.
It ran from February or March
No.
until the spring?
No,
Started.
from September, October till March.
Okay, so basically the season.
Yes.
The first season, which was winter. It's a winter
Right.
season. So you get, how many years did you guys, that's a lot of driving. Your weekends were eaten up.
Yes, that's for sure.
And avoid this if you want to. Roughly, what would you guys come home with gross? I mean, you had expenses and everything to come out of. Do you remember any of the check sizes that you came home with from Montreal?
I really don't, Ted.
Okay, thousands.
Yeah, it was.
Nice. So it's a pretty good weekend gig for Two guys
That wasn't
just out
all
of,
profit. That was bank's money plus our own money.
that was my point. I mean, it's like saying a prize fighter won $3 million for his fight. Not by the time you take all the expenses out, and you
No.
guys certainly had your expenses. At what point did you, I mean, did you do that for years or months?
We did it for approximately 3 years that way.
Okay. And you didn't have, had you incorporated by the time while you were still out on Medina Line Road?
Yes, just before we bought the building.
Okay. So now we're officially CNC Fur.
Yes.
And shortly thereafter, you decided to buy a barn down on the corner of Weber Drive and Seville Road.
Yes.
Weber Drive is now Airport Road. Did you, had you guys scoped that out? How did you know it was available? Why did you think you needed a...
Alex Nebraski told us it was available.
And you guys had outgrown your garage. You had a nice 2-car garage out there, didn't you?
It was
County Line Road?
all right. It wasn't nothing fancy or anything.
But you guys were outgrowing it.
Yes, we outgrew it.
Your name was getting around, more and more people bringing their fur to
Well,
you.
at that time, we were starting to buy off of other dealers and stuff, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're working both sides of the fence.
Yes.
You were. And at some point when you bought the barn, which was in, do you remember the year? I have it in my notes.
78, I believe you said.
I believe that's correct, yeah. Yeah, you, in July of 78. You decided somebody had to hold that fort down while you and Chuck were living in a van.
Right.
And you picked Debbie Basler. Mm-hmm. How did you guys find Debbie, or Debbie, how'd you find them? How'd that work?
Well, we ran into it in a bar, actually.
All
I
right.
was working. I was going to school, and I did that.
What kind of school were you going to?
I was going to Akron U
Okay.
at the time.
All right.
And I met Chuck, Larry, and Tubby, and they were saying they needed a secretary, an office manager, and they told me that they had bought this barn, and but they weren't going to be in it yet. And then I didn't see them, and I told them, I would be done with school within 6 months. So I thought they would be back in. I never saw them. I tried to look up Larry's number. I couldn't find him, so I just thought I'd never see him. Well, all 3 of them came in. And
What bar were you working at?
at Tally Ho in Wadsworth.
Which was out by the car dealerships.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yeah. And they told me that, yes, they definitely wanted me to do the job, and told me that they wanted me to go out there and meet the barn, go in the barn, and see where my office was going to be, and it was going to be in the milking room.
So you think you're moving up to an office manager job, and you find out your office is in the milking parlor.
Well, yeah, we all went there, and I looked at it, and they assured me that they were going to remodel, and that my office would look really nice, and
How did that go? Did they do that?
oh yes,
They did. I remember when it
I
opened.
got to choose what I wanted, actually.
I think it's important to also mention at the time frame, you bought that in 78. Nobody had a cell phone. Mm-hmm. Nobody had a computer. When you guys took off from Montreal with a van load of goods, did you know what you were going to get for them? There's no way of knowing for sure, was there?
We had a pretty good idea.
Just because you'd been around it.
Yes.
But on a computer, you would just look it up and say, what are they paying today? Maybe it's better we wait till Wednesday. That wasn't available.
No.
So now we have what affectionately became known as the Fur Barn, which was CNC Fur. If we could see that picture from the newspaper, there it is. Debbie, can you, either you or Larry, who's in that picture?
Stan Connell, Debbie, me, Tubby, Bob Otanikar, it looks like.
Yeah, I think it is. And Dave Weldy?
Weldy.
Is that
Dave
Dave?
Weldy.
Dave Weldy.
Now, Debbie, you said that when you met him, there was Chuck and Larry and Tubby. Was
Correct.
Tubby part of the business by then? Or was he just helper, buddy? I know you guys were all friends.
He was part of the business by then.
Okay. Was Stan or anybody else, Stan Connell or any of them in part of
Stan
the
had
business?
been working with us.
Okay. Stan was your brother-in-law,
Yes.
correct? With all your experience as a barmaid, how did you feel doing the job of office manager when you first started down at the Fur Barn?
Well, that wasn't, I knew how to do books anyway because my father had a plumbing business, and my mom showed me on how to do bookkeeping and everything that you had to know. So I had some experience in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did a lot more than keep books. Because there was no computer, you couldn't reach out. If they were out on the road, if they were on their way to were you still going to Montreal when you had the Fur Barn?
I'm not sure.
Or did you switch, because you went to...
I don't think we were at that time.
Where did you...
I think we were.
I think they came, that wasn't Henry.
Henry Stein used to come down from
Yeah.
Canada.
And you had a guy in Michigan at one time, didn't you?
Yes.
Were you selling to Sid maybe by then? Which was the guy... Do you remember Sid's last name?
Brayback. I do.
Braybeck? And he was what part of Michigan?
It's in Bay City.
Well, that shortened your drive from Wadsworth to Bay City, from Wadsworth to
yes.
Montreal by a good bit. But there's no way for you to reach out to them. If you've got an issue, you either got to handle it or find a way to put it off. I find it amazing that the business held together, not because of either one of you two, but it just things come up and you need an instant answer. You've got two owners to deal with and you can't reach them. You've got to wait till they call you, right?
Well, I always knew where they were at.
You knew where they were heading.
Yes, well, yeah. And so wherever they were heading, I would call them and tell them as soon as they get there, to call.
Okay. Everything didn't have to happen in the blink of an eye like it seems to have to happen today.
Correct.
So you're now selling the majority, or did you guys sell everything up to Sid?
We were
in
selling
Bay City?
pretty much everything to Sid at that time.
Okay. And you're still in the van.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still in one van? Is just Chuck and Larry, or has there another
No.
van been put on yet?
I think Tubby was with us at that time, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And Dave was too, so we had to have the other two vans.
So you went pretty quickly from a one van operation to three vans.
Yes.
And is that as big as it ever got? 3 vans?
Well, we had 3 vans, 2 one-ton trucks with 12-foot bed box trucks, and we had a 18-footer at one time.
I vaguely remember the box trucks, and that was pretty much just for the hauls up to
New
Sid
York.
or either New York or Michigan.
Right.
And you did you ever have to go out on the road to see what they did out there, or did they ask you to?
They asked me because I had never been to New York City, and so they asked me if I wanted to go and take a load up, and
Did you?
yeah, I did. And then I was in New York City a couple times if I had to meet with Evelyn, the secretary.
All right, we haven't made that transition in the story yet to New York City, but we'll get there. So you're still going to Michigan. Now, I do know part of the business is grading the fur.
Yes.
Can you tell me how that process works? What goes into it?
You look at each individual skin and you determine what size it is, what quality it is, what color it is, the texture and the density, and the damage, and determine the value of it.
Damage could come from preparing it. It could also come from what? Damage out in the
Gunshot
field,
wounds.
just from being out in the wild.
Yes.
I can't picture you guys standing there with a tape measure trying to figure out how big they were. What did you do?
We made a board that had all sizes on it for the raccoon. That was the only thing we had to basically measure. Now there were sizes on other thing, but you did that by eyeball pretty much.
Yeah, that's what there wasn't sizing on a muskrat or
No,
anything else?
there was sizing on the muskrat, but It's large, extra large, medium, and smalls, basically.
But you could see that eyeball in it?
Very closely.
Okay. So you've got the boards made up. I remember those on the counter down there. Did Tubby make those? They look like they were handmade.
I'm not sure who made them, to be honest with you, Ted.
Okay. So we're creeping up into the 3 vans. You're hauling things to Michigan. Did you go weekly, daily, monthly? How often did you go up to Sid?
At that time, as often as necessary.
Okay. Did he have any problem with it?
Yeah, we ended up with a problem. We got a call from New York City one time. We knew the fellow we were selling to that was eventually getting the stuff, and got a call from him and says, I want everybody in New York tomorrow.
So you are
talking
selling
about Sid and his son, Chuck and I. And I don't think anybody else went with us.
So at this time, you're selling your goods to Sid. Sid's turning around and selling them to New York City.
Yes.
And then the guy in New York City says, I want all of you up here.
Yes.
Who is the guy in New York City?
Joel Schoenfeld.
And that the one you dealt with was Evelyn, his secretary. Was she a relative?
I don't think so.
Why do I seem to remember Joel's sister being involved in the store?
She was in making and selling the coats.
They actually cut and sewed at the store or someplace?
They had somebody else do it in New York City, but they had sold them out of the store.
Do you remember? It seems to me that because I went up a couple of times to make a delivery in New York City. It seems to me it was on 22nd in the garment district. Do you guys remember that?
Jeez, I don't remember, Ted, either.
Because it seems like there were
That's
people
been
with
40 years ago.
I understand.
Yeah,
It seems like there were people with racks of clothing
Yes.
going up and down the sidewalk.
you would see them, it'd be snowing, and you'd see them with the racks of coats, fur coats going down.
So Joel calls you all up. You all show up. What did Joel want?
There was discretion in what was in the bags for their value.
A discrepancy there was.
Yes.
What was he saying?
Things were not being graded properly.
Okay.
And we went up there, and he gave us hell and says, look at what I've got here. And the very first bag that we opened had a raccoon in it that was very memorable. It was a very, very big female coon. It was killed in the summertime. And it was in a bag that was, at that time, I forget what the price was, but it was like, $20, $25 animal price-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And the value was $2. And what Sid had done is taken stuff that he had bought off us for $2 and been putting it into bags to make more money.
Sure.
Where they didn't belong, let's put it that way.
So let's go through if I'm a trapper here in Wadsworth, I come out and sell my goods to CNC Fur out at the fur barn. You're grading it there.
Yes.
And then you're going to pay me. Then you're taking it, in this case, to Sid. He's going to grade it and pay you.
Yes.
Then he's going to send his to Michigan or New York, or take them there. They're going to get graded again.
Yes.
I've watched it. You can't grade by groups. You have to look at every
Every
pelt,
skin.
correct? So somebody is looking at those 3 times,
Oh, yeah.
maybe 4, depending.
By the time the customer comes in, yeah.
So Joel's going through, or somebody at his place is going through them one by one, just like everybody else has.
Most of the time. Some customers he had where he could just ship them. They'd call him and tell him what they wanted. And he was dependable enough that they would say, send this to us, or where it could be any place in the world.
Okay? Some of it stays in New York, and his sister puts it into her operation, makes a coat or a cape or something out of it.
Very small percentage.
What does Joel do with the rest of it? Did you ever know, or did you ever care?
All goes overseas.
All of it.
Or if there's a customer in New York, it goes to manufacturers, basically. It goes to people that will end up with the coats.
So really, until technology, I'm going to call it technology, came up with any kind of fabric that was as warm and as pliable and as durable as fur, these were almost all going into gloves, hats, coats of some sort somewhere.
Collars, something like that, yes.
Let me back up just a minute. We talk about the fur as mostly muskrat and raccoon. Were there other furs that came in the door at CNC Fur?
Oh, yeah.
I know in Europe, beaver was huge for a long, many years, back in the 14, 15, 1600s. Did you guys do much in beaver?
Not too much. Beaver never came into being legal in the state of Ohio. They was transplanted, and I don't remember when. And it was probably 10, 15 years after they were transplanted before they became legal in the state of Ohio.
I'm not understanding transplanted. From where to where?
Animal was caught in another state or another state, basically, and is transplanted into our river systems and the pond or the lakes and stuff
Local.
like that.
Does that imply that we had pretty much trapped beaver to a dangerous level?
There wasn't any in Ohio at one time.
That's funny. That's exactly what Europe did. It's what made the founding of this country financially, to a large degree, was founded on fur.
Oh, yes.
And beaver was a huge part of it because they
Yes.
had pretty well trapped Europe dry. Let me stay on that for just a second because regardless of what anybody thinks about using animals for warmth or food, that's not the issue today. You guys also used to run some sort of classes. Debbie, did you set those up or did the boys?
For the hunter safety classes.
Hunter safety, was it conservation? Tell me about that.
That was through, I can't think what it's called.
4-H?
No, it was through the
Wasn't for it.
Division of
Medina County,
Wildlife.
the Conservation Division
Yes,
for Ohio?
yeah.
And what did that all consist of?
I don't remember.
It was classes for what was legal in the hunting industry or what was legal in the trapping industry, how to shoot weapons,
How to safely handle traps, I hope.
type of stuff,
Yeah.
which you have to, the class you have to take now to be able to get a hunting or trapping license.
Is anybody trapping, Larry?
Very, very few people anymore.
There's no money in it,
No.
which, again, there are other fabrics these days that, we'll get into that too. So you guys are, you're doing pretty good. You've bought a building, and you guys, that was in the business. I also seem to recall there was a company boat, was there not?
Yes.
And that wasn't a little dinghy. What was that?
22-foot Starcraft.
Okay. So there was, the company's doing well.
Yes.
You started in 78 when they bought the building.
Yes.
So let's sneak up into the mid-80s. How's the business doing? How are you doing? You're happy? But you're busy, aren't you? With all 3 vans out on the road and...
I'm busy, but you don't mind it because you're there for working for 26 weeks and you have the summer to look forward to because you have it all off.
I forgot, this is a seasonal business.
It's
Yeah, you
seasonal,
had every
yes.
summer off.
Yes. And it's winter time, so what else are you going to do? So might as well.
Now, what else? There had to be times you're dealing, let's just say, basically you're dealing with Bill Reimer and the First National Bank.
Yes.
Because as you grow the business, you need more money to buy with,
Yes.
but your returning checks when you sell in New York are getting bigger.
Yes.
What was a good year?
5 million.
Sales, what? That was your best?
Yes.
5 million. That's a lot.
In 6 months.
In 6 months.
And how often during the season are you dealing with Bill Reimer, Debbie?
Oh, gosh.
Weekly, daily, monthly, as needed?
as needed. It could be weekly. It could be twice that week. I mean, it's all depends on how much that they would spend to buy the fur. And if we're running short, we had it set up with Bill Reimer that anytime we needed a loan, that he would help us out. And we had a meeting with him before we actually started the business, I believe, at the barn, and to make him understand what the business was all about and how they operated and how important it was to have this money when we need it. They're on the road and they need the money.
Yeah, it's the lifeblood of any business is cash flow.
Oh yeah. And Bill was always there, every time.
There had to be time. Well, again, this would have been so much easier with cell phones and computers or laptops or anything, but we didn't have those.
Right.
How did you know how much they were going to need? They're in Oshkosh or they're in Des Moines or wherever.
They would call me.
So they'd call and say, hey, we just spent X.
Yeah.
If you knew X was bigger than the account, you call Bill.
Yes, or else I see in the checking account, they're out on the road and funds are getting a little low, so I would call them and tell them.
Call the boys on the road.
Yeah, and then I would go up or I would call Bill Reimer, and then Bill Reimer would wire it to our account.
Did you ever have checks hit the bank that before you got your money squared away?
At times, yes, and Bill, he took care of it.
He always covered them. Made sure they were covered,
yes.
Which instigated a new loan.
Yeah.
And until your check came. You guys, were you still, you delivered all of your fur to New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was no way to ship it, was there? You couldn't call a common carrier or a roadway.
The only time we shipped any was when we was in California and Arizona.
All right, we'll get to that in a minute too, because I'm thinking CNC fur is Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, I don't know, Kentucky, pretty local, Pennsylvania, but you guys did expand. Let's finish up on the banking. So this is a one-on-one relationship with Bill Reimer. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the bank was involved. I believe he was the vice president at the time. Irwin
was president.
Irwin was the president. I can't. His first name is escaping me. So this is literally a phone call for you. Did you have to have Chuck and Larry's permission to make that call, or did you just say, this is all that's left in the checking account, I'm going to call?
Well, I would call and let Chuck and Larry know. I wouldn't just say, I need $10,000 without talking to them.
Were the numbers that big sometimes?
Oh, yes.
Do you ever remember seeing that checks were hitting that weren't covered, and how big did those numbers get?
Oh, Lord.
$495,000, biggest check I ever wrote.
$495,000.
Yeah.
That you bought fur with.
Yes.
That's a nice small business for two guys from Wadsworth, Ohio. That's impressive, Larry. All right, let's go to the other states, because I did learn recently that you guys bought in other states. And I didn't know you ever bought anything in California. And further learned you had to have a business license to deal in those states. Were you involved in setting up those business licenses, Debbie?
That's the only way that they could buy it.
So you'd have to get a hold of, like in California, Sacramento, and say, I need a business license for our business in Ohio? Send me the paperwork?
Yep.
Wow. Imagine how much easier your job would have been if we had a computer and a cell phone back then?
Yes.
Or whatever. So what were you buying in California?
Bobcats.
Mostly?
A few gray fox, a few kit fox, but mainly bobcats and coyotes, a few coyotes.
Anything in the Montanas, the Utahs, that area? Did you guys do business out there for anything?
We were up in North Dakota one time buying coyotes. Anything that was like from Washington State or Oregon or up in that area would be shipped to us pretty much.
All right. If you found if you found a lot of goods that you wanted in Oregon, but you weren't licensed, could you have it shipped to California and you go buy it there?
No, we'd have it shipped to our building in Wadsworth.
Okay, but if you didn't actually go out there to buy it, did you still have to have a license in Oregon?
No,
Okay,
not if it was shipped to our
to
building.
do interstate shipments like that.
Right.
But it was hard to ship wasn't it, the commercial carriers?
We really never had too much trouble. When we started getting the big volumes of stuff, we would fly people out there and
Rent a
we'd
van?
buy it and rent a truck and put them in the truck and head them for New York, wherever it was from.
Gotcha.
We would also have them they would be shipped to the airport.
Right.
We had to pick them up at the airport.
Yes,
in
that's true.
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
You're carrying an awful lot of dollar volume goods in these vans. The business is a winter business. I don't ever remember having a wreck or anything that totaled vans, that squandered goods, did anything. Am I missing something? I don't remember any.
No, we never had a wreck or anything that stopped the business. Not that I remember anyway.
I don't recall.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, that's pretty crazy when you think about it, doing all that driving with all that material and goods.
We were lucky.
I think there was more to it. I think you were very conscious of what you had.
True.
And I think
No,
everybody...
the people the people that hauled it, because people like you and there was other people that would
Glenn
haul it
Live
to New York.
So the people that were in the business that worked for you guys, let's do a quick rundown. You had Chuck and Larry at the top. You had Debbie in the milk parlor. Tubby was Richard Boyer. A lot of
Yes.
people will remember from Tubby's ice cream store, which was on the corner of 261 and High Street. And who else? Dave
Welding.
Dave Weldy. Was he was one of the ones in the van going out in the country?
Ones in the van, and Bob Lieutenant Carr was with him for quite a while, and Tubby and Stan Connell ran together. We always ran in two-man teams because we figured two sets of eyes is better than one, and it worked out for us very well.
Good. So, and I recall also there were times when you would have to funnel. You got a short season. You got a lot of fur you want to deal with. All these trips back to Wadsworth to drop things off. I do seem to remember they were funneled into Toledo at one point, and somebody had to go up to Toledo and get them back to Wadsworth.
If there was somebody that was going to be available, somebody didn't have a truck full or whatever, where that was possible.
Okay. Now you've graded them. Did you grade them one by one in the field when you're out
Yes.
buying them? And then are you coming back to double check those grades
Yes.
when you get back? So you guys had a busy 5-6 months.
Oh, yes.
That's crazy. How long did it last at the fur barn? You bought it in '78. When did you close the fur barn?
13 years?
Oh, yeah.
No, it wasn't.
I was
Yeah, it was
there.
about 13
I
years
was there.
later, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was there 13 years.
So it
Yeah.
came to an end. Did it dribble down to an end? Did you see things slowing down? Did you see prices
Prices,
decreasing?
it got so cheap where you just couldn't make a living on it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, your fixed expenses didn't change.
No.
You've got the cost of travel. You've got everything else stays the same. So if you're not getting any money out of it at the end, it's over.
Right.
And Debbie, when it did end, where did you go? Where'd you go to work?
I didn't know what I was going to do. My parents were in Florida at that time, so I said, I'm going there. And I was there with them for a couple weeks. I had a cousin who was in the Navy, and she was in Orlando, and I stayed there for the winter. And then I came back home and did other jobs.
Larry, where did you go when it was finally over?
Well, when I was finally over, I went back to Doors Incorporated.
Which was run by
Mark Skank.
Mark Skank and his dad, Monty. Was Monty
Yes.
still there then?
Yes.
Okay. And Chuck I don't remember where he went first. I thought he
I
went to
think
the
he
box
went
board,
back
but
to the dairy.
he might have gone back to the dairy because that was a good spot. That was a good spot for him. I don't think there's anything else. It came up, it rose, it did great. I think it's amazing that it held together for as long as it did. Anything else that you'd like to add? I'm not gonna run out of time, but we'll wrap it up by anything you'd like to add.
I want to say it was the best job I ever had in my entire life.
Working for these scallywags?
I enjoyed every bit of it. I helped clean the muskrat. I helped scrape the coons. It was a little hard to do, but
I bet it was.
I tried. They had a walk-in cooler that was huge. I mean, it was the whole job was the best job I ever had. I enjoyed my time very much.
Thank you.
You're
Larry,
welcome.
would
You
you,
did a very good job for us.
Thank you.
Larry, would you have changed anything about the way it happened? The business end of it?
Yeah, I wish it wouldn't have ended.
Yeah, me too.
It wasn't really a job for a younger man. I mean, for an old man, though. What do you think you could put those hours in these days?
Not those hours.
You guys were working crazy hours 6 months.
We was working as many hours a day as we had to, and Debbie was too.
Yeah, I don't remember anybody being on a 9 to 5 schedule back then.
No. Yeah,
I don't either. And
I want to thank people around Wadsworth for the support that they gave us by selling us merchandise.
there is if we could see the T-shirt eventually, as all good companies do, you have to have a T-shirt.
Absolutely.
And this is the logo of the T-shirts that they had. As I recall, they were pocket T-shirts. Came in a multiple different colors.
Yep.
And I know everybody in our family wore them. You guys wore them.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wore them. You saw them around town.
We got rid of those a lot of places.
I believe it. Did you guys sell them to anybody?
No.
I was going to say, I don't think anybody I know ever paid for one, but everybody
Gave
had
them
them.
away.
Yeah. Well, it was good advertising, let's
Yeah.
face it. I don't have anything else to add. I think it's amazing. I'm glad we've captured it so that it's a business that will never exist again in this country. It's certainly not in this state. And you guys took it to an awfully high level. The article that we showed from the newspaper said you were like the second largest dealer in the state at that time, which is 1978. That's pretty good. Pretty good for a couple of guys that just enjoyed what they did and were good at it. Larry, thank you very much for this time. Debbie, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you think of anything else, call me. Until then, we'll see you next time on Tell Ted.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.